Hi everybody, so today we're going to learn a couple of important lessons from a super cool Grant Green lick. The first one is how we should play everything like it's the blues. So that's the way Grant Green plays. And the second thing is how the rule is more important than the notes, and this has to do with rhythm and landing in the right place. If you watch the end of the video, hopefully you'll get an insight into how bebop language actually works in the real world. Hello, welcome to Jazz Star Scrapbook. So today I want to talk about a little lick from Grant Green's, well, I think it's my favourite Grant Green solo and might be one of my favourite jazz guitar solos of all time, which is Miss Anne's Tempo from the album Grant's First Stand. And this is a B-flat blues, but it's, I think, the best guitar jazz blues solo I think I've ever heard. It's fantastic. And now Grant has a bit of a reputation of being a sort of blues and grooves guy, but actually his formative influence was Jimmy Rainey. And at this early point in his play, you can still hear a mess of bebop stuff. It's just that you might not notice it right away because Grant has a habit and a way of playing these things as if, well, they're just vibey blues licks, even though actually when you look a little bit closer you realise that he's playing Charlie Parker stuff and so on. I'm going to play the lick immediately before it as well as the lick that I'm going to talk about mostly today. And this first lick is like this. So it really is just a dead simple blues thing. Like it does this little, and then straight down the minor blues scale, right? So I think most guitarists will know how that is. Now you'll notice that perhaps if you were playing an electric guitar with thinner strings, you know, you might bend up to that note if you were playing more in a sort of Chicago blues style. But certainly, you know, harmonically, this is nothing that wouldn't be familiar from, you know, B.B. King or AC/DC or whatever. The next lick he plays is this. The thing I want to draw attention to first is we have this. They're played with very much the same intensity. I don't know if I'm doing it justice. Obviously I'll stick up Grant's original so you can hear that. This is obviously a chromatic bebop lick. You know, but that slide, that's kind of like... that has the same sort of juice to it because of that slide at the beginning. And if you notice, I'm playing this with 3 fingers, and often people come up to me and they say, oh, how do I play a bebop scale? It's 4 notes on a string or whatever, you know. And the answer is any way that sounds good, which isn't perhaps the most helpful answer. But in this case, I'm doing it with 3 fingers, and I think this is probably how he did it, because Grant Green, I think, was mostly a 3-finger guitarist. Now, when I talk about this stuff, people go, they sort of straw man my position and say, well, why wouldn't you use your little finger if you can? And I mean, actually, Grant Green uses his little finger all the time. You know, later on in the solo, he plays this. Well, I think actually it's slightly earlier. You know, that's a classic Grant Green lick there, and I don't think you could play it without the little finger. So it's not that. It's just, as I've explained in my other video, the hand is kind of in this position, a little bit pronated. I'll put a link to the video up above. And that means you can stretch a bit further with your 3rd finger. And you can also use the little finger as well, but it's kind of disadvantaged a little bit. And the other thing is that if you use 3 fingers, you obviously have to slide your fingering in order to play a chromatic run along a string like that. Whichever finger you slide with is up to you. I tend to use the 1st finger myself when descending like that. And then there's a similar lick on the next one, the fret lower. The 3 notes there. And then we join it up with this enclosure lick. Apologies for the slightly rattly guitar. This is a 4 phrase, it's called in Barry Harris, and it's going around the 3rd of the E flat 7. It actually happens on beat 3, so we're kind of like playing the B flat 7 thing, the chromatic thing, 2 beats into the E flat 7. So it's like, so we get there a little bit late. That's often the case in jazz. I'll talk a little bit more about the construction of the line in a minute, But I think again, like for any of these sorts of things, for instance, you know, if you're playing any sort of Barry Harris added note scales or bebop scales as they're sometimes called, it's good to get into a vibey fingering with it. You know, you can do this with things like this as well, like I was talking about the minor scale and Grant Green licks in the minor in the last video, so things like this. That's quite Grant Greeny, isn't it? You know, things like that can be fingered with 3 fingers. Not everything can be easily fingered with 3 fingers, but it's worth working on it, I think. Especially if you have bigger hands. Maybe not everybody gets on with this. I notice people with smaller hands tend to favour 4-fingered stuff, you know. And it's not that you can't sound vibey with 4 fingers, but this guitar has a funny little skinny neck anyway, and I find that actually if I play with 3 fingers, it really helps me get some of that vibe. Right, so let's talk a little bit about the construction of this lick, okay? So this is basically a B-flat 7 scale with some added notes going into this E-flat 7 4 phrase, the thing that wraps around the third. It's like an enclosure of the third. This enclosure of the third is really common. For instance, here's an example from Wes Montgomery. Yeah. You just get it all over the place, right? Charlie Parker used it, etc., etc. So this is, you know, one half step above the third, and then chromatically from the second going up to the third. So in the R key. Yeah. And then the lick before it, well, if we just play a B-flat 7 scale straight down, so B-flat mixolydian from B-flat, which is the starting note, we end up on the upbeat, right? Ba-ba-doo-ba-ya-ba-doo-dee-doo-da. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but I wanted to tie this into the Barry Harris explanation of his added note scales, which was never, oh, if you play the added notes, your chord tones are going to go on the beat. You hear that a lot. I never heard him say that. What he said is that it makes the scale come out right. Okay, so if we just play the scale coming down, it's on the upbeat, right? And that means that our next phrase starts on the upbeat. So if you want to join lots of phrases together, like Barry Harris taught, then actually it's useful to have your little phraselet end on the beat. And to do that, you can add in an odd number of notes. If we're starting on the odd note, which we are, 1 is odd, and we're starting on the beat, we can add in 1 or 3 usually. But let's do 1 for now, and it's between the root and the flat 7, which is also known as a bebop scale. And we see we end up on the beat there. I'll play that again. Ba-ba-doo-ba-ya-ba-doo-dee-ba-doo-ba-da. Yeah. And that's, you know, it's kind of square, but it's kind of, for this lick, we want to end up on the beat because that's where Grant ends up. I mean, it certainly doesn't sound square when Grant plays it. And if we do that with 3 notes, we can add in another note between the third and the second and the root. So it'd be something like this. Now, I find that quite awkward to play with 3 fingers, but it is possible. Yeah, there's a little bit of that going on, right? So to put it in the right rhythmic place, we can start it on beat 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, and then we end up in the right place. Now, Grant has that little slide at the beginning. That actually lasts for a beat and a half. So we're going to move it to beat 3, and then the next note, the passing tone, the natural 7th going to flat 7, is going to happen on the and of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and like that. So carrying on. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 with 3 fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Right? Okay. Now, that's not actually quite what Grant plays. You'll notice that is, as I said, a little bit awkward for me fingering-wise, especially with 3 fingers. Now, Grant actually plays this. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Has exactly the same effect, but it's more guitaristic. We're going... That's much easier to play. You'll notice my hand is moving less when I play that. Actually, it comes out in exactly the same place, and unless you listen hard, and I had to listen quite a bit to it, actually, to be honest with you, you might not realise that it's not the Barry Harris thing, because it goes by really quite quickly at that tempo. And this relates to a dictum of Barry Harris's, which is that the rule is more important than the notes. So the rule is we've added 3 notes to the scale, and even if they're not in a conventional place, the scale still comes out right, which is what the added note rules are about. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you find that useful. I'll see you on the next one.